Anthony, the U.S. president has seemed to defy all political gravity. The fact that the president recently tested positive for COVID-19, has that helped to bolster further support for him?
Well, listen, I think it's a mixed bag. I think that you're correct. He has defied political gravity. Let's talk about him objectively. He has never had the popular vote. He's never had an approval rating above 50. And I'm talking about the weighted average approval rating, not just Rasmussen. And so he has defied gravity. And his only likely scenario to win re-election is through the Electoral College. It won't be a popular vote victory. But it's a mixed bag. I would say his supporters, they may like the fact that he got COVID-19 and survived, that it may embolden his science-denying narrative in terms of dealing with COVID-19 with a group of people. I think the flip side is there's a lot of strange peculiarity to the way he's handling himself and some of the things he said about COVID in terms of it not being worrisome or dangerous, and don't let it overly impact your life. And he doesn't like wearing masks. You can see pictures of him in Marine One with his staff all masked up, but he won't wear them. And so I don't know. Some people like that. I think the majority of the American people do not like that. So we'll know exactly who likes what on November 3rd.
How much weight do debates or town halls have? I mean, can a camp actually get a bump after one of these town halls or debates?
If you had asked me that question 40 years ago in 1980, I would have said yes. And you had evidence of that. Ronald Reagan got a significant bump after that debate. He became acceptable to a large group of Americans as their potential president. And most Americans didn't feel things were going well at that time. And so he won in a landslide after that debate. It's very different today in the age of social media, the proliferation of all these media fragments. We've got everybody siled into their collective biases, if you will, and their confirmed biases. So I would say no. It's sort of odd. There was no movement after the conventions. There's been no movement after what I would think of as seismic bombshells being dropped, whether it's the president's taxes, situation with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. The polls seem pretty rock steady. So either the polls are very, very wrong, or the consistency of the polls tells you that people have already made up their mind in this election.
You mentioned Joe Biden, who is currently leading the national polls. Millions of Americans have already voted. Can you see a scenario where Donald Trump wins again?
Well, listen, I'm a numbers person. I've run money my whole life. I'm a statistics buff. If you go back to the last election, the pollsters got it wrong by about 1%. So they were inside the margin of error. And they got a few districts wrong. You guys may know this up in Canada. There are 31 districts that the pollsters call the Dirty 30. And those districts went for Barack Obama in 2012, and they decidedly went for President Trump. And those districts are really a microcosm, if you will, of all those battleground states. And so right now they're decidedly for Joe Biden. If you gave President Trump the margin of error, you said, okay, there's a 5% margin of error in this, let's just give him 100% of it, it still looks like it's going to be a lopsided election. So I would say it's less likely. It's not impossible. You've got 2 weeks to go, or let's call it however many days to go. And let me tell you something, in Trump world, that could be like 500 years. The news cycle is moving so quickly that there could be scenarios that could be somewhat disruptive towards the end. But if you go back over the last 7 or 8 weeks, nothing has moved these polls. And so I think it's going to be hard, but nothing's impossible. I certainly wouldn't rule it out. I saw Mr. Trump come back from a 14-point flash polling deficit after the Access Hollywood tape was produced on October 7th of 2016. So could it happen? Yes, but I think it's less likely this time because, unfortunately for Mr. Trump, he is the polarizing candidate in this race. He is the one that people are racing to the polls, waiting 11 plus hours online to vote out. He's the Hillary Clinton of this race.
Indulge us here for a moment. If you could speculate, what would a second term under Donald Trump look like?
Well, I think you'd be entering an American winter. I think we're in late fall in America right now in terms of what's gone on. The president has made the country sicker. He's made it weaker. He's disrupted our international standing and weakened our Western post-World War II alliances. And he's made the country poorer. The decisions that he made related to COVID-19 have put us in the steepest recession since the Great Depression. So and the wealth gap is way wider now under his realm. So to me, I think you'd get more of the same. I think he would be emboldened for further science denying. And so if you look at epidemiological studies or the University of Washington in terms of expected deaths, if we don't change our healthcare protocols, you could have 4+ million people die in the ensuing second term. So no, it would be an American winter. It could be an America that disengages itself from NATO. It could be an American president that 2 or 3 years into his reign gets rid of Vice President Pence and appoints his daughter, Ivanka Trump, to the vice presidency. And then he could even pull a stunt where he resigns from the presidency and allows his daughter to be the first woman president in our history and run her against the incumbent. So there'll be a lot of nastiness. He's a threat to the American democracy. He's a threat to our Western alliance, and he's a threat to the classical understanding of the Western liberal model that emanates all the way from the foundation stone in Jerusalem up through the Greek and Roman empires, out to the French and the United Kingdom, and here into Canada and the United States. He's a threat to that. And so I hope it doesn't happen. It could happen. We'll survive it, of course. Will mount an aggressive resistance against him and the antics that he's portrayed against the country. We'll have to see.
You used to be Team Trump.
I was emboldened by the narrative that the president, remember, we're all products of our upbringings. And so I grew up in a blue collar family. My dad was a crane operator. He was an hourly worker. I would describe the family I grew up in as an aspirational blue collar family. Unfortunately, the last 3 or 4 decades of globalization and the repositioning of manufacturing around the world has turned those families that were once aspirational into economically desperational. And so I was attracted to Mr. Trump after leaving the Jeb Bush campaign, because Jeb unfortunately left the race. And I thought that his message was one that could be a winning message. But unfortunately, he's failed to deliver for those people. And I didn't anticipate the bellicosity of his rhetoric. I didn't anticipate the bullying. People would say to me, well, he was a lot like that in 2015, so he's no different today in 2020 than he was in 2015. And so my only response to that is, he may not be different, but I'm different. I'm more psychologically minded. I think the firing and the subsequent media roasting that I took after that, I think that gave me a perspective that I probably wouldn't have had it not happened to me. And it's made me more empathetic and more aware of the damage that the president's doing to his fellow citizens. So yes, I was with him. I've disavowed him because I would suggest to you, and I would suggest to anybody, if we were on a publicly traded board and you and I had to make the decision to select the CEO, and we selected Donald Trump over Secretary Clinton, and now we have 3.5 or 4 years of data of the person's behavior, policies, the setting of the culture, we would seek his immediate removal. This wouldn't even be an issue. In fact, our outside counsel would be running into the boardroom saying, are you guys crazy? You have to get rid of this person immediately. So I hope that happens. I hope there's enough. Unfortunately, in America, these are popularity contests. It's not a hiring decision, but I hope there's enough smart Americans that will look at this and say, no more of this nonsense.
Anthony, from your perspective, what are the biggest issues in this election? Is it foreign policy, job security, economic security? What are the biggest issues?
Well, to me, it's a three-legged stool. And so I said it, we're weaker, we're sicker, and we're poorer. So let's talk about that. Our weakness is stemming from his lack of a coordinated strategy with our allies. For some odd reason, he's been denouncing our allies and democratic leaders of the West and Asia, and he's been supporting and offering praise to autocrats and dictators. It's a very bizarre behavior from a country that Lincoln called the last best hope for mankind. So we need to reset those alliances, reestablish them, and tighten them. That'll help us with our adversaries, of course, and it'll sustain global peace and prosperity if we continue to do that. He's made the world less stable and more anxious as a result of these policies. Secondarily, as it relates to poor, he's destroyed the economy. He has no platform of opportunity for the lower or middle class. He offered up these sizable tax cuts, which have helped the very wealthy and have helped the nation's corporations and improved the stock market. But only 15 or so percent of the American people own the stock market. And so what you find is African-American unemployment is up since he took his job. U.S. unemployment is up. It was 4.7% when Barack Obama left. It's now above 8%. He just has not done the job. And lastly, you can't have somebody in that office that is as insecure as the president. He's not capable of managing anything because he has absolutely no self-confidence when he's talking to experts. He has to talk over them. He has to speak with great overcompensation and great blustering. And he rejects, it's almost this reflexive thing for him to do. He wants to try to prove that he's smarter than people that in fact may be smarter than him in certain subject areas. And so he almost rejects what they're saying to him to prove a point. And this has had a colossal tragic effect on the impact of human life in the United States. Tens of thousands of people have died, Larysa, as a result of his decision-making, and it's tragic.